So for today's video, you probably already know because of the title of this video, but obviously the last video I posted was my 3rd trimester pregnancy symptoms, and it's been a bit of time since then. So yep, I've had my baby. I'm now 8 weeks postpartum, so my baby's 8 weeks old. In this video we'll be talking about my birth story, and in upcoming weeks I'll be uploading videos talking about my postpartum journey. So yeah, let's get into it. So for about 2 weeks before I actually gave birth, I was experiencing period-like cramps, and I told this to my midwife because I was like, what if this is early labour? She was like, you're not in labour yet, but it's a really good sign. She said any sort of pain that you're feeling down there, it's doing something. So yeah, I had that for around 2 weeks, and then so that second week of those 2 weeks, it got more intense. It basically just felt like I was on my period like throughout that time. Then on the actual day, I remember, I think it was maybe the day before, I was having contractions. So the contractions are different from cramps in the way like cramps is just like a dull sort of ache, but with a contraction it's like a tightening. People describe it as a surge, but I don't know if I would describe it that way. It just feels like just like that. I don't know how to put that into words, but it just feels like something's like this inside. And those contractions were lasting around 40 seconds long, but they were irregular. So they would maybe come every 20 minutes, every 5 minutes, like it was sort of all over the place. So on the big day, I woke up around 6 AM, like I couldn't sleep that night, and I was still having these contractions. And then I noticed that these contractions were now starting to feel painful. It's actually hard to describe because I don't actually know if I would describe it as painful, but they were just very intense. But it was enough to make me feel like, okay, like this is different now. I ran myself a bath and I got into the bath. This was like 6 o'clock in the morning. I got into the bath and I was just like chilling. And then I started timing my contractions, and again, they were still very irregular. I think I just went back to bed after that. Like I had a bath and I got bored and I was just like, oh, I might as well just go back to bed. So I went back to bed, and then I was just sort of like scrolling on my phone and stuff until Manny woke up. When Manny woke up, I told him I'm having like contractions and they feel like they're the real thing this time. And well, from all the things that people had told us and like the birth classes and stuff that we went to, they were saying that once you start having contractions, it could still be like days or like hours until it actually happens. So when it came to us thinking, should he go to work? I was like, well, yeah, go to work, it's fine. And if anything big does happen, then I can call you. He went off to work, and then I was at home. And for some reason, I thought it would be an amazing idea to start cleaning the whole house from top to bottom. Looking back on it now, I can see that it was probably just like a nesting thing. Like obviously the baby was literally going to come in a couple of hours, so I was like getting the nest ready. As I was going along cleaning, I was still timing my contractions, and I noticed as the time was passing, my contractions were becoming more regular and they were coming more closer together, more intense. Just, yeah, they were getting more and more real as time was going on. But I kept saying to myself, like, no, surely it's gonna get so much worse than this. It might not even be today, it could be tomorrow. So let's not panic now, like at the first hurdle sort of thing. So I carried on cleaning, I carried on going. It got to a point where I think I was cleaning the floor in the bathroom, and I looked at the bath, and I remember the midwife saying, if you have a warm bath, it can help with the pain. There and then I literally stripped off and I ran the bath again, and I sat in the bath and I was like, ow. You know when women give birth, they tend to make that moan, like ow noise. I started making that noise and I was like, okay. From the bath, I then called Manny and I said, I think you need to come home. And I don't know what it was, but I think once I sort of had accepted that this was actually happening, like I'd called Manny and made him come home from work, things started to change again, like it became more intense then. By the way, I hadn't even called the hospital at this point. I hadn't had any paracetamol or anything like that. I don't know, something inside me just knew that this is it. Anyway, Manny took his time coming home. It took him like half an hour to get home, and then once he got home he started cooking. And I remember sitting there thinking like, what are you doing? I literally called you home because I think I'm in labour and you're cooking. But then he was like, oh well, when we go to the hospital, don't know how long we're going to be there, we haven't eaten anything yet. I can't really remember the conversation, but we ended up ordering Domino's. So imagine, I'm like in labour, I've been cleaning the house, we've ordered Domino's before we've even like called the hospital or anything. Anyway, so we ordered the Domino's. Manny then started to see like the pain that I was in. He was witnessing me having these contractions, and he was like, should we go? And I was like, I don't know. So we called the hospital then at this point. The hospital basically said, yeah, to come in like as soon as we're ready. But I was still like, I had it in my mind that I didn't want to go to the hospital and then they would examine me and tell me that I'm only like 2 centimeters dilated or something, and then they would send me home. Like, that was the worst possible scenario that I could think of. So I just didn't want that to happen. So I was like, no, like I want to stay at home as long as possible, even though I was in pain, but it wasn't any pain that I couldn't cope with at home. It is so hard to explain what it was like unless you've sort of like gone through labour yourself. During the contractions, everything changes and it's like you're in pain and like, I can't cope, I can't do this. But then as soon as the contraction goes away, everything is back to normal, like nothing happened. No pain, no nothing. So that's why it was kind of conflicted. Like, it was very painful, but when I wasn't having a contraction, I felt completely normal. So that's why I was sort of thinking, like, in between contractions, I was like, oh no, I'm fine, like I don't need to go to hospital. So anyway, once I got off the phone to the hospital, I was saying to Manny, like, no, like I'm fine, like let's just wait for the pizza to come and then we'll eat and then we can go. So we were like proper chilled about this. The pizza came and we ate, and then I had my hospital bag packed already, but I just like made any final touches, like made sure I hadn't forgotten anything. And then we loaded the car up, we put the car seat in, and then I remember sitting in that passenger seat. And then I remember looking at the house and looking at the back seats of the car, like seeing all the bags and the car seat, and I was thinking like, this is the last time I'm gonna see my house and see this car without a baby. I was excited, but I was really nervous as well, because I know that like however much pain I was in, I knew that it was about to get worse. So yeah, 8 p.m. we got to the hospital and they examined me and they said that I'm 4 centimeters dilated. So I was ready to go straight onto the birthing ward. So I was really happy. I was so worried that they were going to examine me and I'd only be like 2 centimeters. So when they said that I'm 4 centimeters, I was like, like, thank God for that, we don't have to go home. We went straight to the birthing suite. I had my own room. I had a little bouncy ball, bed and a water bath thingy because I had a water birth. And this midwife came in, she was like, oh hi, like I'm gonna be your midwife, I'll be looking after you. And I remember like I was having a contraction literally as she was saying that, and she was like, oh, I haven't shown you the gas and air yet. Honestly, 100% 10 out of 10 would recommend. Gas and air was the most beautiful thing. It didn't take the pain away, but it did sort of like take you away from the pain. That's the only way I could describe it. It made you feel drunk or like high or whatever. I was inhaling it, and then as I was like exhaling, I was like giggling. So yeah, it didn't take any pain away, but it just sort of made the pain easier to cope with. So I was still like pretty relaxed in between contractions. My midwife, every time she came in to check on me and Manny, she was saying like how surprised she is to see a woman so far like into labour, and I'm still like giggling and like having a good time with my partner. Also, we took the Dominoes with us, like the leftovers, and I was still eating the Dominoes whilst I was in labour. So like in between contractions still, like throughout the whole labour, in between those contractions, I felt completely normal. Like nothing was happening. It was just the actual contractions. When the contractions were happening, which only lasted about a minute long each time, I was in pain and it was very, very intense. It just felt like a big squeeze, like your whole body sort of tenses up. And I think that's where that sound comes from, you know, when like the women in labour, they make that noise, sort of like a groan, and I genuinely think it's just because of that squeeze. It just pushes air out, and in a way sort of the vibration of it when you're making that sound, it sort of helps. So yeah, anyway, we were just sort of testing out different positions, and so I was bouncing on the birthing ball, and then I was laying down on the bed. I was trying to get on all fours on the bed, like I was just seeing which was more comfortable. And then the midwife said to me like, oh, did you want to try the bath? And I forgot about that. I was like, oh yeah, actually. So she ran the bath, and then by the time I actually got into the bath, it was around 11 p.m. So I was in this like active labour for about 4 hours from the time I got to the hospital to the time I got into the bath. I tell you, once I got into that bath, I could not get back out again. I started having the feeling like I want to push. I was scared at this point, like I didn't want to push, but we started to notice that even though I wasn't pushing, my body was pushing for me. Like I was pushing, but I wasn't doing it. And the midwife noticed, and she said to me like, if you feel like you need to push, like go for it. She kept checking in with this little monitor thing to hear the baby's heartbeat, to check that he's all okay, and he was chilled throughout the whole thing, like his heartbeat was fine. She asked me to go on my back quickly so that she could examine me again. So I hadn't been examined again since I got there, so this was my second examination, and when she put her hand there, she looked at Manny and she was like, yeah. So the baby was born around 12:45, so I got into the bath at 11, he was born at 12:45, so quite a short amount of time from that point until he was born. So up until this point I was pretty calm. If anything, I was quite enjoying myself. Like the actual labour, I didn't mind. It was just during contractions that was hard. But this bit where I was pushing, this was the hard bit. You've probably heard of the ring of fire. They call it a ring of fire for a reason, and I have now learnt that the hard way. The only way I could explain it is just imagine a Chinese burn, like when someone gets your skin and twists it like that, so then you have that burn. But imagine them twisting it to the point that your skin literally rips in two. That's what happened. I tore down there. I had like 2nd degree tears, I had like stitches and everything. That was not fun. And the thing was that it wasn't like a fast tear either, like it was a slow tear. The midwife was saying like the head is there, like we can see it, like you're crowning now. That burn, it was just unlike anything. It was so painful. It was so painful. I was having these urges to push, but I was in so much pain. I honestly didn't think I could take any more pain, and I was stopping myself from pushing, like, because I didn't want to push anymore because I would be in more pain. And Manny was there, like Manny was so good, like he was holding me up. So I was laying sort of like floating on my back, and Manny had his arms underneath me, like underneath my shoulders, and he was holding me up, and I just sort of had my hands like around the back of his neck, and I was just like looking up at him, and I was like, I can't do it, I can't do it. The midwife was like, you can do it, you can, you're so close. Yeah, little did I know that that next push that I did, the baby was born. Like, I was watching so many episodes of Call the Midwife before I gave birth so that I would be prepared, but I was not prepared for this. So I thought that when you give birth, the head would be born first, and then you would wait a little bit, and then you would birth the shoulders. That didn't happen with mine. In that one push, which I didn't do by the way, my body pushed this baby out because I was refusing to push. He was out in one push. The whole baby came out. Like, he just flew. It was so fast. I was so out of it. I was so high on this gas and air, and I was just in so much pain. I didn't even know what was going on. Next thing I knew, they put a baby on me. So once the baby was born, I was sort of just like relieved, like, oh my god, I did it. Like, the worst part was over. And then I realised that I actually have to get out of this bath after I've just given birth. I had the midwife on one arm and Manny was on the other, and they like helped me get out of this bath, and then they laid me on the bed, and then I had to birth the placenta, which obviously was nothing compared to birthing a baby, but it was still painful because of where I tore. When I then birthed the placenta, like all the tears like then reopened like as it came out, so that was quite like very stingy. They brought the baby back and they gave the baby to me to have like this golden hour, they call it. So we had like the skin to skin for around an hour. So I just laid there on the bed with the baby on my chest and Manny there, and we were just sort of like processing what had happened. It was so like surreal. We didn't think it was going to happen that fast. Like, we was expecting to maybe be there all night, maybe even the next day. And hearing about other people's labours and births as well, I think my birth was probably a good one. It didn't last too long. I wouldn't say the pain was so much that I couldn't cope. Like, I did it. It was just that last final bit when the head was crowning. That was the part where I was like, I can't do it. That ring of fire, that pain, that only lasted around 15 minutes, I think, in total. But at the time, I didn't know. I thought that was going to be like that for ages. Like, I didn't know it was going to be so quick. And then I remember they gave me the gas and air again because they needed to stitch me up. The midwife tried to stitch me up at first, but there was too much blood, so then she had to go and get the doctor. And then the doctor came in and he gave me an anaesthetic like injection down there to numb me. It took them around 3 hours, I would say, like, to stitch me up and then get me all ready. So I had a shower, and Manny helped me shower because I was still a bit wobbly on the legs after I'd just given birth. And then they took me down to the postnatal ward around 4 AM. They wanted to keep me overnight as well because I'd lost quite a lot of blood, so they needed to monitor everything and monitor the baby. But because it was like 3 AM, so it was like during the night time, there was no visitors allowed like on the postnatal ward at that time. So Manny couldn't come with me and he had to just drive home. So imagine he just went through all of that. He just watched his partner give birth and like probably go through the most traumatic thing that he's ever experienced. And then he had just had to drive home and go to bed on his own. No partner, no baby, just like as if nothing had happened. It was weird for me as well. Like, I remember they just took me into this room. There was my bed and there was the cot to put my baby in. And they were just like, okay, good night then. What am I meant to do with this baby? Like, what am I doing? So this isn't really related to the birth, I would say, but I will just mention it. So whilst I was pushing, at some point I felt something go bang, like at the bottom of my back. and I'm pretty sure it was my coccyx, otherwise known as the tailbone. My mum, when she gave birth, broke her tailbone, so I was like already conscious and already aware that something like that might happen. When I felt that bang, I didn't feel any pain and I didn't really notice any difference. It was just after I'd given birth, once I'd gone onto the postnatal ward and I was sort of trying to get up and down from the bed and stuff, I had this immensely intense pain in my coccyx, and it was so bad that there were some points where the baby was crying. I literally could not get off the bed. I would have to call the nurse to come in and pick him up because I just could not move. I was in so much pain. I've spoken to doctors and midwives since, and I was like wanting to see if I could get an x-ray done. They basically said that I may well have broken it. It could have been dislocated, like anything could have happened, but they can't x-ray it because even if it was broken or anything, there's nothing they can do. All of the treatments are the same no matter what's happened to it. So yeah, I'm referred to physiotherapy now. 8 weeks postpartum, that is still bothering me. But yeah, I will talk about this more in my postpartum video. So that was the birth. My baby was born. That was the whole story. I just want to say that obviously my birth is not everyone's birth. Every single woman is different. Every single pregnancy is different. So just because my birth was like this doesn't mean that everyone else's birth would be like that. I think I was very lucky, both my pregnancy and my birth. It could have been so much worse. I would definitely say no matter what, it's always 100% worth it. When you hold that baby in your arms and you're just like, wow, like I created that. So that's the end of my birth story. If you liked this video, then give it a thumbs up. Comment below your thoughts. If you don't know me, I upload every Friday, so if you want to see my face on your screens every Friday, then hit that subscribe button and I'll see you soon.